What if I told you that running using a heart rate isn't the end all and be all? What if I told you that the Maffetone method, the Kevarvan formula, and all these things was just a number? What if I told you that you can get faster if you use this method? And today I'm talking about, have you ever heard of the phrase rate of perceived exertion or effort? It's called RPE. Now, I'm not sure whether you use it, but I know if you are a runner and you're looking to get faster, you're probably looking at heart rate training. You're probably looking at zone 2 training. You're probably just trying to figure stuff out. Or maybe you have already got it all figured out and you want to try something new. Or maybe you've been using this method for a long time and you really don't care. I'm going to talk about it today because I think there's a lot of runners who could actually benefit from this. So I've attached a chart called RPE and why every runner should be familiar with it. Now, whether you use it or you don't, it's something that I wanted to share with you. I'm not the creator of this. It's been out there for years and years and years. A lot of people have used it, and I think that the topic of RPE, or rate of perceived exertion or effort, has a special place in my heart, and I think every runner can benefit from being familiar with it. This chart is a grading intensity of your running. It's on a scale of 1 to 10. I'll get into the history about that later on, but it's a universal language for measuring your training or progress without digging, too deep into the data and comparing for variables like weather or tiredness or variance in your running or your running shoes, or the whole list goes on, right? If you're in an area where there's a lot of snow, that could be a big thing. But look, no matter how good your GPS device is, right, or your watch, right, it can't tell you how you're feeling or what your motivation or your willpower or your muscle fatigue level is on any given day. RPE does. And that's why I think it's important. It also prevents you from being too prescriptive, too rigid in your pace. I mean, some days are going to be better and worse than others. We all know that. And consistently trying to hit the same time or a speed or heart rate can be counterproductive in a lot of ways. So using RPE as a guide helps you detach the effort of your run or workout from the outcome rather than getting wrapped up in your whole 10K time of beating a particular STRAVA segment. I can't go above or below a certain heart rate. It can be too much sometimes. And RPE focuses on the exercise rather than the result. So what the heck am I talking about? What is RPE? What is the rate of perceived exertion? But basically, it's a simple tool that can help you tune into what your body's doing and still reach your running goals. At its simplest, RPE is a scale of 1 to 10, measuring the intensity of your run, 1 being extremely light activity like a stroll, like we're talking a couple of steps and then slow down, right? To number 10 being an all-out sprint that you can only maintain for a few seconds. Now, I don't know how many of us run at that kind of intensity, but that's kind of what I'm talking about. The RPE scale was developed by a Swedish researcher named Gunnar Borg. In the 1960s, he created the Borg scale, which was originally a 6 to 20 scale, designed to correlate with heart rate. So for example, 12 corresponded roughly to a heart rate of about 120. This scale was widely used in sports science and clinical settings, assessing exertion levels. Later, Borg introduced a 0 to 10 scale called the Borg CR10 scale to simplify things and make things a bit more intuitive. This newer version is more commonly used today, specifically in running and endurance sports. Why is RPE useful? It works even if heart rate data is off. For example, dehydration, fatigue, caffeine use, hot temperatures. It also helps with intuitive pacing, avoiding burnout in races. It can be combined with heart rate data and pace for a well-rounded approach. It keeps runners from relying too much on technology. RPE and Zone 2 training. Since I'm a big fan of heart rate training and the Maffetone approach, RPE can be a great backup tool. My Maffetone and Zone 2 training usually falls around RPE 3 or 4, meaning I should be able to breathe roughly through my nose and hold a conversation while running. If my heart rate monitor glitches at any time, I just go by feel and stick to an effort where I'm comfortable, but I'm moving comfortably. Now, there are a variety of scales and ways that you can measure RPE, but generally these days the scale of a 1 to 10 is regarded as probably the simplest and probably the most widely used out there. Now, depending on which scale you use, you can even use it to estimate your heart rate during exercise without needing a heart rate monitor. As crazy as that sounds, I was doing that today on my run until my watch died because I forgot to charge it. But that's a whole other topic. My GoPro didn't work to film this video, and my watch, I've got 2% battery left on it, and I can't even finish my run and record it, but I decided that I would do a little bit of rate of perceived effort. It was hard. It felt good, and I didn't fall down on this white stuff. But the benefits of using RPE, it's a great way to monitor the intensity of your running, okay? Stay in tune with your body without relying on technology or tracking your metrics too closely. Again, like this thing dying today, right? So perhaps the most compelling argument I would say for adopting RPE is recognizing that there's no two runs that are going to be identical. I mean, many factors come into this that affect the amount of effort required for a run, both external and internal. And both physical and psychological factors also affect RPE. These can include weather, right? Especially wind and what temperature it is. The terrain, right? Like a 6-minute mile on trails takes more effort than the same distance on, let's say, the road, right? The running shoes, some are springy, some of them are minimal support. Ultra can be springy, but it can also be minimal, right? The level of fatigue that your legs are going through or you are experiencing, and whether you've eaten recently, like fueling on an empty stomach or running on an empty stomach. Willpower, motivation, all of these things, when considered, there's varying factors that it makes less sense to compare your performance based purely on speed, distance, time. Given all the factors that are subjective, measurements can be, much better a guide to a level of intensity. So, for example, if you are scheduled for a 4-mile moderate run, right, or a 6-mile, and you had a stressful, crazy week at work, you're not sleeping well, your moderate intensity run may have to be run at a slower pace than let's say the previous week when you were feeling better. Look, your intensity level feels the same, but your pace may be slower, which is perfectly okay. If your body is feeling run down and needs rest, it's important to listen to what it's telling you. And that's why RPE is it's actually a really powerful tool. It prioritizes how you feel, what your effort is, and doing the work and doing the run over the result. Running based on RPE is an excellent tool for both beginners or experienced runners, although beginners probably should spend more time familiarizing themselves with the scale and practicing their runs at different efforts to get used to the feel of it. That's what I was doing today. And another reason why I'm starting to love running based on RPE is that I no longer look at my watch. You know what it's like, every 30 seconds, every 10 seconds, you're looking to see, oh my gosh, am I at the same heart rate? Make sure I'm in the right intensity. What's my pace like? All that kind of stuff. But using RPE is great for tuning in and paying attention and listening to your body. RPE can be kind of friendlier, I guess, to your body than adhering to specific heart rate zones or paces. Sometimes it can get stressful just trying to keep things at that certain level, right? Your runs should be flexible to your body's needs, okay? And you can stick with your desired RPE intensity during a run instead of pushing at, certain times, certain paces. So look, there is differences between RPE and heart rate zones. However, RPE is a close cousin to the activity matrix world of heart rate. Now, what I mean by that is heart rate zones. Heart rate training shares many of the advantages of RPE. My heart rate generally correlates quite well to my RPE. I was testing it today. Now, while heart rate training is arguably easier to quantify and to measure and document than RPE, it's not without some limitations, okay? So there are runners, that are performing a medium intensity activity, whereas their heart rate data would suggest that they're going at a higher intensity. And the more conditioned a runner is, the closer that correlates between heart rate and RPE typically is. So while someone's breathing rate may be far from maximal exertion, their actual heart rate is near the maximal level of exertion. Now, in these scenarios, being able to perform something like a talk test may be more telling than looking at your watch to check what your heart rate is. Heart rate training and cardiac drift is a real thing. When running in hot weather, your heart rate naturally increases as your body works harder to cool itself. This can cause your heart rate to rise above your target zone, even if your actual effort stays the same. So if you strictly follow heart rate training, this might force you to slow down significantly even when your body feels fine. However, RPE solves this. Instead of fixating on heart rate, you run by feel, keeping your effort steady rather than adjusting based on inflated heart rate readings. If your easy effort feels like RPE 3 or 4, even if your heart rate is higher than usual, you're still training aerobically. Now, when it comes to cardiac drift, during long endurance efforts, heart rate naturally rises over time due to factors like dehydration, glycogen depletion, fatigue, and this means your heart rate may climb into the higher zones even though your pace and effort haven't changed. Again, RPE solves this. If you're running at a sustainable effort and it still feels like RPE 3 or 4, you can stay on track without overreaching to rising heart rate numbers. However, for deconditioned athletes, such as beginners or runners returning to the sport, heart rate training can be really frustrating because your aerobic fitness may not be developed enough to keep your heart rate low at reasonable speeds. Again, RPE solves this. A runner may simply focus on easy effort instead of consistently walking to stay in your MAF zone. Over time, your heart rate will naturally drop at the same RPE. So yeah, RPE is a great self-regulating tool, but it's self-regulating. You have to pay attention to what your body is telling you. And each day is going to be different than the previous day. So stay hydrated, run in cooler temperatures, and just pay attention to what your body's telling you with regards to how you feel. One of the benefits of running with RPE is that you don't even need a watch. Although I still recommend it, so that way you can actually log what your performance was like. But you don't need to rely on the output of the device. You don't need to deal with the measuring of what's going on with the activity, right? The intensity, the heart rate, the pace. You just need to log it, that's all. Number 4, heart rate is affected by external factors too. Heart rate is a great way to measuring what your stress level is like. So I don't know if you know, but heart rate is elevated by the lack of sleep, stress, caffeine, warm temperatures, dehydration. I mean, really, do I need to keep going on? But in that way, heart rate is similar to RPE. Factors that wear you out will make running tougher. Your heart rate can also be affected by medication, the rate of perceived exertion scales, which are excellent tool for people, using beta blocker medication. So certain beta blockers reduce the heart rate response to exercise. So rather than relying on heart rate measurements, people will rely on certain beta blockers and are encouraged to measure their exercise with RPE. So what the heck is the Borg ratio exertion scale? It's a 15-point scale that's more difficult to use than the classic one that I'm going to talk about today that goes from like 1 to 10. But the original Borg scale starts at 6, and 6 is where no activity would happen. And just kind of like sitting on the couch. So I've thrown in an image here that hopes you understand what I'm talking about. But the original Borg RPE scale begins at 6 since it was designed to correspond with average heart rates. You didn't know that. I didn't. But according to the Centers for Disease and Control Prevention, CDC, the Borg score 6 corresponds to a heart rate of 60 beats per minute. So a Borg score of 12 corresponds to a heart rate of 120. A Borg score of 200 corresponds to a heart rate of 200 beats per minute. So listen, whatever your RPA number is on the classic Borg scale, add a 0 to the end of it, and that will be the estimate of what your heart rate would be during that activity. Now, since these are just estimates, you can create your own heart rate notes on that RPE chart or scale by measuring your RPE while wearing a heart rate monitor. Again, it was something that I was doing today, but my watch gave out. So the other popular RPE scale is the classic ratio 1 to 10. And it's detached from RPE from heart rate altogether. So why do I look at the RPE of scale of 1 to 10? Why do I kind of like that one a little bit better? While the Borg scale just deals largely with heart rate, the correlation between the two, the 1 to 10 doesn't. But asking athletes to kind of grade their effort on a 15-point scale is probably too many data points for most runners. So how do you discern really from 14 to 15? When the 15-point scale is tied to heart rate, as I've mentioned, heart rate zones vary widely from runner to runner. So depending on a multitude of factors, we're often drawn to RPE in order not to rely on heart rate data. So for these reasons, a number of coaches out in the world have decided to kind of decouple it and come up with a modified scale of 1 to 10 over the other scale. So it's much easier to ask somebody, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, how hard do you think you're pushing right now? How hard are you running right now? You've only got 10 points to pick from, and you're not picking 1 because 1 is kind of, you're not doing anything. But it's much easier range when you've only got 10 to pick from. So this is the Borg scale on the left-hand side and the other one on the other side, just to kind of give you a difference between the two of them. Like I'll throw in some activity examples in the chart. And now these are just estimates and examples, they're not going to be really reflective of every person's training activity, but with respect to their RPE, everyone's going to be different. If you're especially depending on a person's level of condition. Now RPE for running and setting RPE targets, so you can create your own training plans or workouts using rate of perceived exertion, but you'll need to establish a few things first. Number one is your fitness level. So beginner runners will want to start at lower RPEs during workouts than conditioned runners say. So you want to stick with your RPE workouts at first, so that way you can build up your endurance, okay? You got to build that cardiac base like I've mentioned before. But again, you've got your own goals. So if you are building endurance for long distance runs, more of your workouts will be spent in the lower RPE ranges, easier endurance runs. And so if you are training for speed or shorter distances like 5K or sprinting or whatever, you're probably likely going to be in the higher RPE range. And that's where you want to have most of your sessions. So good running plans already have RPE built into them alongside paces and times designed for running based on, your recent running times. So give you an example. Long runs should feel pretty easy on the RPE scale. Tempo runs should feel moderate to hard. Sprints should feel very hard. You kind of see where I'm going with that? So if runners don't want to worry about tracking their pace, they can still stick to an effective running plan by paying attention to the RPE numbers. So look, here's an example of a weekly routine based on RPE that I was kind of playing around with. So Sunday is like rest day, or whatever the heck you want to do. Maybe you do yoga, maybe you do mobility work, but you've got an RPE scale of 0 to 2. Monday, 4-mile tempo run, could be RPE 6. Tuesday, cross training or strength training, RPE could be 4 or 5. Wednesday, 5-mile run, RPE 4. Or maybe you do some, maybe you do some strides in the last miles and they're like crazy vigorous intensity. Maybe that's an RPE 9. Thursday, cross training, strength training. You kind of see where I'm going with that, right? Saturday could be a 10-mile easy run, could be 15-mile easy run, and you're going to be in, 3, 4, let's say. Again, you can put it however you want, play around with it and kind of figure out what works for you. I was thinking about how I could use this for marathon training. So I thought, okay, if I sat down and kind of put this into a plan for, a half marathon, a marathon, this is how it could look. So my regular training runs could be run at 4 or 5 RPE. Long runs, would be done at 2 to 3 RPE. Short speed workouts like interval training, could be 8 to 10 RPE, right? So again, you just have to figure out how that works. And then when you're doing intervals, the recovery part could be 1 to 2 RPE, right? Longer speed work like tempo runs should be done at, let's say, 6, 7 RPE. Interval training, 1 to 2 RPE for recovery. Again, cross training activities, again, it could be all vary depending on what you're doing. But you want to allow for peaks and troughs and kind of listen to what your body's telling you, just like you use heart rate training for. Now, there are some drawbacks to RPE. However, there's not too many from my understanding. Using RPE for workouts and are great for most people because they help you kind of gauge the intensity of your own run, okay, without monitoring equipment, without a watch. You just rely on what you feel. However, there are a few things to consider when using the RPE scale. And when using RPE might not be adequate. Very deconditioned, sedentary people might not be able to use the RPE chart very well initially, since even light cardio causes breathlessness. However, once you begin to improve your running and your tolerance over time, you can maybe try to start using RPE a little bit more effectively, right? So RPE is very subjective. So it can be swayed by mood, perceptions about the type of workout. Sometimes conditioned runners overestimate their perceived exertion and they just run way too fast. Sometimes it's that ego thing. And if talking about ego, it can be really hard when you're a runner. So trying to figure out what helps you run faster, to stay out of the injury box and keep moving forward. If you don't want to go down the road of RPE because, again, maybe there's too many data points for you. Maybe you want your watch to tell you where to go and how to do. This video right here on the Kavarvan formula, I think it could work really well for you if you're like a new beginner, maybe establishing, your heart rate zones so that way you know where it is that you want to start. Or maybe you want to focus on RPE right now because if I just run, I'm new to running, I just want to see how I feel, maybe that can be it. But again, you may fall into one of those categories where you may be running too slow, too fast, and you don't know what's going on. And maybe you're not seeing improvements. And then you're like, then what do I do? Maybe it's the Maffetone method that works for you. Some people hate it. Some people just hate it. They don't want to shuffle. But it doesn't matter. Because running is an individual sport. It's only you. So what works for you is awesome. And if it doesn't work for you, then find another method. Bashing one method because you don't like it doesn't mean that somebody else can't benefit from that. We are all runners, and we all come from things at a different point. Some of us are younger, some of us are older, some of us have a lot of experience. And I'm sure you have a heck of a lot more experience than I do. I just love making videos and sharing things I learn. And as I improve, I like to show my results. And if that's the type of thing that you like, then follow along, hit the like, comment, and share the video. It really does help. And guys, like I always say, get out and run. We'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye for now.